For some time, I've been wanting to make my own homemade potting mix. The container mixes that you buy at the store are very expensive. I've looked at a lot of recipes on how to make your own. They all involve peat moss, coconut coir, vermiculite, perlite, which is all very good stuff. I'm sure makes an excellent potting mix, but it's not anything I can source here on the farm. I want to be kind of independent with making my own potting mix. So I stumbled across some sources that said you can make an excellent container mix from sand and worm castings. Now I'm thinking I can source sand here on the farm from creek beds. I can grow worms and raise worms and generate my own worm castings. So I wanted to give it a shot. One source said 50% sand, 50% worm castings. The other two were 20% worm castings, 80% sand. So since this is a test, I didn't get my own here from the creek bed. I just got some play sand at the store. So I mixed 2/3 play sand with 1/3 worm castings. So that is going to be what I'm testing here to see how well it does. Here I have my store-bought potting mix, a top-of-the-line brand. Also, I filled the container half up with the potting mix, add some 10-10-10 general garden fertilize, work it in, and then fill it to the top with the remainder of the potting mix. For my test, I have two Market More cucumbers, roughly the same age. Bias things a little bit against the experiment here because I think the one here for the potting mix is a little healthier looking plant to start with than what I'm putting in my sand worm castings mix. But again, let's see how this turns out. The sand worm casting mix, as I said, I went 2/3 sand, 1/3 worm castings in order to kind of come in between the different sources. It's a lot of people brag on how fluffy their potting mixes are. The store-bought, pretty fluffy. This, like concrete. However, I'm looking at it more as like a, since they're in self-watering planters, almost a hydroponics experiment. As long as it wicks, it should do well. Two other differences. I find that I need to add calcium regardless of whether it's a store-bought potting soil or not. So I crushed up some antacid tablets and put at the base of this cucumber plant. For this one, I crushed up some eggshells. So again, sticking with the things I can generate on my own. Lastly, as I said, I use a commercial fertilizer, 10-10-10, for this, for the container mix. That's kind of standard. For this container, the experiment, again, what can I make on my own? So I'm using a fertilizer made of fermented fish and fermented comfrey. That's also on the Build a Bigger Box site, YouTube site, so if you want to check that video out, that's the only fertilizer I'm using with my experiment here. So this, purely things I can make on my own. This is kind of standard, expensive, commercial way of growing on your own. So come back and we'll revisit these as they grow and also see how they fruit. One thing is, I don't have to win. This has all the money behind it, all the resources. I expect it to do better. But if I can do reasonably well with this container mix that I can make on my own, I'll consider that a success because it's very cheap and I don't have to source any materials from the outside. All right, it's been about a month now. I came down here to put some tomato cages around the cucumber plants that are beginning to send out runners. Quite surprised here. Both plants are beginning to produce blooms. Okay. They're very similar in size. This is my sand and worm castings. This is my premium potting soil. And the plants, I'd say, is a slightly bigger for the premium potting soil, but overall they're very close. So I'm kind of shocked by this. So put some tomato cages on them, and then we'll come back in a couple of weeks and see how the fruits look. Okay, here we are 2 months along. Both of the plants are kind of towards the end of their lives. This is the plant with the commercial potting soil and the commercial granular fertilize. It is kind of my ultimate goal. This is the plant with the experimental 2/3 sand, 1/3 worm castings. As you can see, the leaves are smaller. They're not as green, don't have the dark green of the gold here. We're just now getting fruits, getting cucumbers, and there you can see a little bit of powdery mildew here. Actually, some on both plants. Usually when you get that, you start to get the curled cucumbers, but they're just now several cucumbers of that size. I think I see about 5 from here. They're just now beginning to produce. While this plant has been producing for at least 2 weeks, and just large size straight cucumbers, still has a few, but they're beginning to not look as good as the first ones I pulled off. So this is the result of my experiment. Remember, my goal was not to show you which is best. This is not a comparison. This is a feasibility study to see if I can make all the components, all the inputs myself, and produce fruits at some level. And generally this is not quite as good as I would hope for, but I believe this is primarily a nitrogen deficiency. Remember here, there is fertilize in the potting soil to start with, and then I added granular commercial fertilizer. Here, I had intended to use my homemade liquid fertilizer, which has comfrey and some fish. But this is outdoors, this isn't inside. We've had the wettest June, July I think I've ever seen. So I didn't need to water as much as I would like to have applied my own fertilizer. So, and then when I did fertilize, heavy rains could dilute it or even wash it out. So I definitely got good enough results to know I want to see if I can improve on this so I can make all the components here on the farm. So what I intend to do next is add a compost, which is heavy in some sort of animal manure, aged animal manure, to follow my goal of producing kind of a closed loop, everything here on the farm. I will choose some sort of small animal like a poultry or maybe rabbits, haven't decided yet. Have no interest in horses or cattle, chased those when I was younger, too much work. So definitely a smaller, more of a homestead animal, just to produce manure for fertilizing. I plan to compost that and make that part of my mix here. So stay tuned. I plan to develop this further going forth.